Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm pretty excited. Right now, I'm on Zoom with two wonderful filmmakers. They actually did absolutely everything involved in a film called Lonely Night. And Lonely Night was at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival in 2021, and it took home, I'm going to name them all, 3 awards. They were filmmaker awards, which means that a jury of filmmakers who had films in the festival previously, they make up that jury. So a jury of their peers gave Lonely Night Outstanding Short Film, Art House Experimental, Outstanding Screenplay, Art House Experimental, and Outstanding Performance by a Cast, Outstar Experimental. I just did a funny little brain fart on Art House Experimental there. I think I said Axed House, but anyway. Sarah Lyddan and Skylar Adams, you were the whole cast, and you were the co-directors. Sarah, you wrote it, so thank you both for submitting that great film. Thank you for hopping on Zoom for the Discover Indie Film podcast to talk about yourselves in the film.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And this is fun for me because, Skylar, are you still in LA?
Yeah, I'm in LA.
Yeah, so Skylar's in LA, so he was able to attend the festival in person and do a Q&A. But Sarah, you are not, right?
I'm out here in Brooklyn, New York, but sending all my love to Los Angeles. And the film itself we made on the East Coast as well, so it's got kind of a little bit of a bi-coastal thing going.
Yeah, so this is also almost like, for me, a makeup Q&A, a makeup chat, because Sarah wasn't able to fly in for Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year. So we are recording this in November 2022, and so this is going to be fun. I'll also mention that for those of you who don't know, this podcast gave birth to a TV series on Amazon Prime Video, also called Discover Indie Film. Just talking to filmmakers on this podcast, I learned how everyone with a feature film ended up on a streaming service, and all the shorts were like on YouTube or Vimeo, where they're like 1 in a trillion. So I said to a bunch of people down the podcast, you want to put a bunch of shorts together into a TV series? And now I have a hunch that Lonely Night will be in season 8, because season 7 is set for January 15th of 2023. So now there's so many good films now, like it's crazy. So there used to be 1 season a year, now then 2, now there's 4, every 4 months a new season of Discovery.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's also just amazing to have so many artists and new films shown and shared.
Isn't it cool? So this is not about Skylar and Sarah and their film Lonely Night, but I'm just going to mention everybody that I was invited by someone who started a dance film festival in Exeter, England, in the UK. Actually, I think it's Wales, so you cannot call that England. In Exeter, Wales, and she invited me to be a guest jury member for this dance film festival because I love dance films. And I said to her, hey, if you want to like take all the top films from your festival and we'll do a dance film exclusive season of Discover Indie Film, I'm game. Then someone else has to produce that season. And she said yes. So there's actually going to be, in between season 7, a special. And trust me, these dance films are fucking amazing. Like it's everything from, well, anyway, I won't. But anyway, so Discover Indie Film is a very rad thing, people. So go to Amazon Prime Video and type in Discover Indie Film and watch kick-ass indie, mostly self-made films on Amazon Prime. You know, usually one of the biggest corporations in the world to support indie filmmakers, right?
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Thankfully, they're not totally like breathing down our necks. But anyway, that's enough about Discover Indie Film and all that crap I do. You two made a wonderful film together. I gotta say, it impresses me in every way. But for those who want to hear a really great Q&A specifically about Lonely Night, go to ShermanOaksFilmFestival.com or ShermanOaksFF.com, and you can see the Q&A with Skylar and myself and people in the audience asking questions last year. Because Discover Indie Film, this podcast, is also about getting to know what inspired you two to get into the arts, because it is a rough path, and it's an honorable path, in my opinion, and it's filled with reasons to get off the path. So who wants to start? Yeah, I know. It's like saying to two actor, writer, producer, directors, yeah, to say how rough the path you're on is a gimme, right?
Yes, yeah, journeyman certainly in this path.
It
Given
is.
that
It
we're
is.
both multi-hyphenate, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think one of the cool things is nowadays, I think the multiple hyphenate thing is more accepted.
Mm.
Like they used to tell you had to choose one role. And my snarky comment is, yeah, like Taika Waititi decided he had to just do one thing.
It's so funny, like what, like, you know, you look at like the trends of what scares the industry, and the multi-hyphenate definitely was one of them. And like, I know that Skylar and I talked about this so much when we were getting ready to make the film. Is it's just so much, it's just so accessible to make your own movie, to be a multi-hyphenate, like with your camera. I mean, we shot our film on iPhone. And I feel like being a multi-hyphenate is not only more accessible, but also something that's finally starting to be celebrated, like in the greater industry at large.
Absolutely. All right. So which one of you wants to go first with your path? And I'm talking like, go back to the womb, go back to like, when you were a kid. Were you an acting kid, a creative kid, a writer kid? Did you not get interested in the arts until you got into school? When did each of you catch the bug? And
you can start, Sarah.
I'm going to start. All right. Yeah. Let me jump in. Okay. I love the permission to be very detailed because I can be a talker, but I promise I know when to volley it over to Skylar. If we're going like way back, I was always really interested in I was always like a really performative kid. I was like the little kid that like, if my family was out watching a play or some kind of musical performance, I would like stand up on my chair and like try to mimic what was happening. I always was so in love with stories, and my mom always had this huge box of like her old clothes that my sister and I could use to dress up in. So really like my favorite game as a kid was dress up and like escaping to another world or writing stories. I wrote my first play with the assistance of my mom when I was 5, and it was called "I Told You So," and and that was as my mom likes to remind me. So I was always just so enamored with storytelling, and especially, I think I can now articulate this now and maybe didn't know it then, but I just loved the engagement with other people. I loved the communal act of storytelling and the togetherness of it. And so when I was maybe like 10 years old, I'd moved to a new town in Northern California. It's where I was raised. And my mom was like, okay, it's the summer. I've got this kid who's really outgoing, but she's also super nerdy. So what am I going to do with her during her summers? And she put me in Shakespeare camp with the California Shakespeare Theater, which is a wonderful regional theater nestled in the hills of Berkeley, California. And I went to the 5-week Shakespeare camp to do The Tempest. And my mom picked me up after my first day, and I looked at her in the car and I said, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And I've been working on it. The path has been rocky, but so then from there, I really just especially fell in love with the classics. I spent like my middle school and high school years doing the youth conservatory at the California Shakespeare program, and it was 14-year-olds doing like Merchant of Venice and King Lear and while, looking back and thinking about a bunch of 16-year-old King Lears, you can kind of like laugh at it. Was such a sacred time of just really getting so welcomed into a community of like building ensemble. I had incredible mentors, which, speaking of things that are trends in the industry or maybe lacking, I always found it kind of hard to find mentorship in the arts. And that was something that I really had to work to find. And I was very lucky as a young person to have such profound mentorship. So I did a bunch of Shakespeare. My teacher was trained in Suzuki and Viewpoint, so I did a bunch of that. Loved the really physical stuff. Did programs with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and then ultimately ended up going to UCLA's School of Theater, Film, and Television, where I did what I think a lot of college BA students do. I did a bunch of like German expressionist acting and adaptations from like Werner Fassbinder films and a lot of Grotowski movement stuff. But all throughout, I was really attracted to classical theater and classical arts. And it wasn't until after graduating, suddenly like tossed into Los Angeles, having been very nestled in a very intimate acting program with great teachers and just a lot of safety. I was suddenly in the greater LA. Living in the middle of West Hollywood, being like, how do I continue to be an artist in an industry that doesn't really seem to be interested in that of me, and has a lot of opinions about who I am without even like listening or asking who that person is. And so I actually started every day I would try to watch a film in my first year out of school. And I, at first I started with the more American films, worked my way through like, what won the best picture, and then started moving into like what won the Palme d'Or. And, but it opened me up. I saw In the Mood for Love for the first time. I started watching, the kind of, Italian, like neorealism and old Wim Wenders films, and got totally like shocked by Klaus Kinski and Fitzcarraldo, and I just was totally sent into this new idea about what storytelling could be and how audacious filmmaking could be. The audacity of international cinema was so enwrapping. And so, I worked a million day jobs. I'd be at my break, scooping ice cream at an ice cream shop and be watching like a Gary Wrath of God on my iPhone. Or I'd be working at a theater as an usher, and I'd be sneaking away to finish, some Catherine Deneuve film that I'd been curious about. And that was such a haven for me in a time where I was really artistically hungry and really artistically hungry for home. And the films that I watched in that time were that. And so in the midst of being told I was, gonna play, that I was a certain kind of thing, like an ingenue or an X, Y, or Z, I got to live in worlds where people could be anything, and people were interested in telling the truth rather than telling what was real. And I really found that in cinema. So but seeking, I feel like I'm going on and on, but I'm going to keep going because I'm only halfway through. But I was seeking artistic community and really hungry to go back to school and go through more intensity of training than I had in my BA program, which was an excellent program, but I was just ready for more intensive experience. So I applied to the Yale School of Drama and was accepted. And it was, just getting in was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. By the time I was 13 and realized that, okay, where do people go to study acting? And I heard about the Yale School of Drama, that had always been a dream. So it was a profoundly emotional and shocking experience for me. And, then promptly imposter syndrome set in, as I think it does with a lot of artists. And it is as important to say for artists entering in any industry or any new form that they perhaps have not been in before. But so I began a 3-year program that suddenly, with the pandemic, turned into a 4-year program, which was a great gift. The pandemic began halfway through my second year of school, and Yale offered all of the existing students at the time an additional year to come following a Zoom year. So I spent a year of my grad school experience in Zoom, which was one of the hardest and, at times brutal, but also profound, not only like educational experiences, but artistic experiences. And it was during that time, especially that, I was prompted by teachers and also pure necessity to create my own work. And at first that began with painting. I started painting, and then it quickly began evolving into writing, and then suddenly looking at cinema again. And it was during that time that Skylar and I conceived and made Lonely Night. But that was such a profoundly empowering experience, as well as like a clarifying moment artistically, to recognize within the intensity of a MFA program where you're taking in so much information that that I was, the captain of my fate, and that I had so much access with the phone, with the people in my community, with so much access to the world, even in a time where the world felt really confined and hungry. So I went back to being in person last year, and I graduated in May, and now I am once again out in the world. So I'm now entering the industry anew, and feeling very lucky to be so aware of my own agency in an industry that sometimes wants me to be the bar floozy, which I'm happy to be, but I also want to be other things. And so, I've had the luck of being able to do like the SVU episode and getting that experience, but even just being like, okay, like what do I want to make for me? And that feeling so much more available after our experience making Lonely Night has been just so inspiring and grounding as I enter the industry anew. And believe it or not, that's the short version.
I do believe it. And for anyone who, I just want everyone to know that on Zoom, myself and Skylar, we were nodding a lot so that you right? When you see they only hear our voices. So when they only heard your voice, they might have thought she's going, but we were like encouraging you to keep going. First of all, I guess I have to say congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're also kind of humble, even talking about Yale, the Yale acting program. I mean, the list of alumni is kind of ridiculous. Everyone throws around Meryl Streep, right? But it's so that's an amazing accomplishment. So congrats on that.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited, and I had such a profound experience there, which could be a whole other podcast, but
I'm sure we could do a whole podcast on in between UCLA and Yale when you were in LA and
working on the odd jobs.
I might be biased, but I just picture you as a recent college graduate sitting across from a casting agent who is just judging you solely by your face and saying, based on your face, I think you should. And you're like, God, I did Shakespeare. I went to college. Really, all you care about is my face, and you want me to do 3 days on a soap. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It was, I was teasing Skylar the other day, and of course, grad school, you're doing Medea, you're doing the Greeks, you're doing all sorts of stuff, and so then doing an SVU episode as a bar floozy was just a good reminder of like life in the industry, and also like our own artistic independence and how that exists, Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, a gig on SVU is beats the pants off of scooping ice cream, right?
Oh, it was amazing. I had so much fun. And I was just so grateful to be there and learn. And it was a whole other mechanism. And I'm still very much at the beginning of learning about film and TV. And so, I was eating the whole thing up. It was incredible.
For sure. And you reminded me during that at the Q&A with Skylar after Lonely Night, I remember saying to him something along the lines of, this is so cinematic, and I love the way you both chose to direct it and shoot it. But I think I said something along the lines of, I feel like you could also perform this piece as a play. And that's when Skylar said, well, funny you should mention that, we're both have a lot of theatrical experience. So based upon that, is that almost a segue for Skylar to give his life story?
I suppose it can be, yeah. Sure. I'm from LA, and my folks work in the business. My mom's a first AD. My stepdad was a camera operator and cinematographer. But generally, like my mom being an AD was sort of, my introduction into like the world of making movies and television. When I was very young, like 3-4 years old, my mom was working on a bunch of films, and she would take me and my brother with her because we were still young enough. We weren't quite in school yet. So when she was on location on these movies, we'd be there with her. And one of the movies we went out there with was called Clara's Heart with Neil Patrick Harris and Whoopi Goldberg. And I think I was 4. And Whoopi Goldberg saw me and my brother there like every day. We'd come out, or like, every other day we got there on set and stuff. Or like hanging out in the trailer by production or something. And so she asked if my mom would let us be in like the final scene of the movie. So when I was, very, very little, I have a little scene with Whoopi Goldberg. And I think that sort of experience put this thing in my head of like, oh, you can be on camera and do this thing and then like see it later. Maybe like a year later, the movie came out and I got to see it, and I have relatives come, hey, Mr. Movie Star, hey, and all that stuff. It was kind of fun having that. But just sort of growing up, around film and TV, I've just sort of always had this thing that I got access to and got to be a part of. And, my favorite days were when I got to go on set and like, go to work with Mom.
And it's also kind of, I think that was such a very cool position for you to be in as a kid, because I talked to so many people who, grow up far from California, far from LA, and there's no conception of how much goes into filmmaking and television. And your stepdad doing camera and your mom being a first AD, all of a sudden you knew that this industry is also full of regular people working regular jobs, right? Like it gave you such a perspective, I bet.
Definitely. One of the things I feel very lucky about is that like I got to know how movies are made and how movies and TV are made, and how much goes into it, and sort of I feel like it's little things like that have helped me later in life, knowing just, in my own, when like I want to do this and realizing that, and just, just knowing where to stand even, or being like, oh, I see how this goes. There's nothing like I can tell, which I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but I just, my mom and I will sit and watch something together, and we will talk over it constantly and just talk about, oh, they missed that. Oh, this happened, or something like that. Just going back and forth in like some silly, interesting thing. And someone else, like my brother, sitting there, just shut up. I'm trying to watch this. I knew from an early time that like I wanted to be in front of the camera. Like I saw like, because behind is cool, but like, it's not really it seemed like the actors, what they were doing was fun, and they were having way more fun than everybody else. It's like, I want to do that. I think I can do that. And I know coming on sort of like a LA Law or something, and knowing my mom was AD on the last season of LA Law, and one of the actors on it had a commercial, and somehow I had memorized the whole commercial and then like performed it for him, and he was just sort of like, I guess, tickled that this little kid came in doing this, like commercial for cold medicine. And like I knew the whole thing and could recite it just like him. And sort of, so from that, I was always a person who could like mimic voices and do accents and stuff. So I was sort of that guy with my friends, and play those games. And it wasn't really until high school that I started acting, mainly because my folks just didn't have the time to be able to. They're working, full time, so it wasn't like they couldn't. I wanted to be an actor, but I couldn't really do that until I was, a little older and could do it myself. So,
did they have a little bit? Did they have a little bit of the, because they're in the industry and they know how tough it is? Did they figure, let's make him make the extra effort? So, like, because when you were performing that commercial and stuff, obviously someone could have said, "Hey, you should put that kid in acting camp," and they might have said, "No, he's got to work twice as hard."
I know my mom did not want to be a set mom, from her experience, because she worked on a lot of stuff with kids, because she worked with Doogie Howser and then on My So-Called Life and some stuff like that. So she knew sort of what that was for young kids on set, and sort of what it meant for the demand of like what a parent has to be there for, and also the things that the children are put through as well. And she was just like, I don't want you to have to. She did not want that to be my upbringing. So it wasn't until like, if I, was older that I could do anything. And I only really did theater in high school. But that went really well. Like I auditioned for, when I was in 11th grade, and I auditioned for the school play because my girlfriend was in it. And I got like the lead in the play. And, it was Bye Bye Birdie. And I couldn't sing, or at least I didn't think I could sing, but then everybody else said I could. And I started getting, people telling me I was good at it. I was like, oh, maybe I am good at it. I guess I can try and do this. So when I graduated high school, I joined the Marines instead. So you
want to explain though? You want to share, like, was that, that's a very cool
people ask
move.
Me, why did you join the Marines? I said, well, I thought it would make me a better actor.
For real?
Yeah, for real.
I bet that's super valid.
I mean, I knew it was going to be this thing that I would never do if I was, if I any older. It was like now or never. And it was something that, because my dad was a corpsman in Vietnam. He was like a medic with Marines and stuff. So, and he had some horrific war stories, but it always felt like this thing that was just sort of like what young men are supposed to do. Find yourself, learn about yourself, how you are in the world. And I'd never really been anywhere, outside of, my own little LA bubble and in California. I mean, at least not really learning anything about the world. So, when the recruiter showed up, I was like, yeah, fuck it. Why not? Let's try it and see what happens. It's only 4 years. So anyway, I was a Marine for 5 years, because I stayed in for an extra year, from like 2000 to 2005. I mean, I guess it probably helped. It took a lot to sort of get past a lot of the military things get put on you, but it gave me a lot of real world, real life experience and stuff to draw on. I got out in 2005, and I started working immediately as a technical advisor on a show called Over There, which was about the war in Iraq, during the war in Iraq, like while it was happening. And the main tech advisor on the show, hired me on the spot when I, met him, because my mom knew a transportation captain who had worked on this pilot, And when I came on set of the show she was working on, right after I'd gotten out, she introduced me and he's like, "Hey, I worked on this show. Wait, hold on. You got to meet this guy." And he drove me from their set to Santa Clarita, where they were shooting over there, where I met the TA. And I had just gotten back like a month earlier. And he was like, "Oh yeah, come in tomorrow. You can drive trucks and, we'll, do stuff." And so I immediately started working. And I did that for a few years, till the writer's strike sort of shut everything down. And I ended up moving to New York, because I was like, you know what? I want to be an actor. I know this is something I really want to do. And I don't know what I'm doing. So I was like, I should train and learn. And the only acting school I had ever heard of, because it was a poster on the wall in my high school, was the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. It's like, sure, I'll go there. And I went and auditioned, got in, and learned some good basics. And then after I trained at the Esper Studio with Bill Esper, who I think was just the absolute, just the best. He was the best. It took me going to New York and like learning like this is what actors do. There was somebody had told me something I've been working on. He said that you get TV stars from LA, but you get actors from New York. And I just felt like that was like the best advice. I was like, wow, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. So I moved out there and I, learned how to do it. I made a few short films in between. One of the first ones I did was sort of for a contest for Spike TV. And they wanted this was like when Spike TV was a new network. This was 2007. And they wanted 3-minute shorts, of like sort of pilot presentation ideas. And I had this silly idea about Marines on like their days off, like after, they get off work. And, so I wrote this silly, 15-page script, and shot it in like 10 days. And just like go about a hotel party where some Marines steal a penguin from the Hilton Hawaiian Village and brought it back to their hotel and partied with it. And then learned very quickly, I have no idea how to edit or do any of this stuff. I thought I could do it all, and realized how important it was to like have people that you can work with that also can help and not do it all yourself. And so I was able to make this cool little 3-minute short. Didn't win anything, but for me, it was sort of like, oh, this is something I can do. This is something I'm good at and should pursue more. Coming back, to LA, I moved back to LA in 2012. I'd gotten an agent out here for film, TV as an actor. And I had sort of a few little parts on some shows. I was on Jane the Virgin, and had like a silly part where I die, but they kept using it over and over and over again because there was some big plot point that nobody even knew. And I ended up running into one of the actresses years later, and she's like, "Hey, I'm that person you're talking about. I didn't know either," because everything's clouded in mystery. Anyway, so I went to film school a few years back in 2016. I said, you know what, I should also learn how to do this. I have this GI Bill to take advantage of. So I went to Cal State Northridge, made a few films there. And, when we graduated right before the pandemic, that May, and, had, some idle time. And then, with Sarah, she and I decided that, we were spending this time together while everything was locked down. We should do something. And we made this film together. And that kind of brings us up to about now.
That does. I'll share the incredibly uninsightful insight, but I bet you hear this all the time, that I bet your time as a Marine, I think the discipline alone probably gives you an edge in the arts, because in a lot of ways people, you obviously, I mean, look, I'm going to say you have the talent, because right, like you have the talent. You even, like in high school, you just went out for a play and you ended up the lead. Like, people who have talent without discipline tend to go nowhere, and you got to get the discipline from somewhere, I think. And it sounds like you've gone through this, that whole story. I heard a lot of focus in a way, like even just leaving LA to go to the in a drama academy in New York, I think is a really smart move, because I mean, one might quarrel with the putting down. Obviously, you can be a real actor in LA, but if you wanna take away your, this was also home for you. So like, just getting out of it and just counterpunching in New York must have been huge for you as an actor and an artist.
It was so amazing. Like, I feel very lucky in that the places that I was able to live when I was in New York were these artist communities. And like, something I feel I don't really find here in LA that I definitely found immediately in New York was a sense of community and like knowing your neighbors and doing things together that way that we just don't really do here. And like, immediately when I moved into these buildings, it was like everybody knew each other. We'd all come over, hang out, make music and art together, have like, block parties and festivals. I ended up hosting a rotating open mic night in my loft. That would then like once a month, because we do it every week, there'd be open mic night, but would go from like different apartments around the two buildings that we lived in. These two big buildings across the street from each other, the McKibben Lofts in Brooklyn, in Bushwick. And so, like, we all got to have this really great sense of community and learn from each other and make things together. Like, I was in a rock band for a year, and, it was just one of those things where I sort of feel I got a great sense of discovering who I am and what was really important to me, that I wasn't able to really find until I had that experience. And even coming from like being in the military, as a Marine, there's so many walls that builds, that you have to have, and being able to let those things go. But to go back to what you're talking about with like the discipline of it, I mean, like, I know, in the sense of filmmaking, especially because it's all about, you have to do something, you have to make decisions. If you're directing a movie, especially, like, people are there and you're trying to make things happen. The discipline of being able to stay calm, and communicate effectively, but ultimately just make decisions, because it's better to make a bad decision than no decision at all. I think that's one of the big takeaways I was able to get from that.
Excellent. Absolutely. I think you both glanced over it, but do you want to, how did you two meet? Who wants to share because I like, so you both smiled and laughed. So, there's got to be a story there of some sort. I'd be a really shitty interviewer if I didn't.
Skylar, do you want to start that conversation? I think we have to tell it together.
Okay. I was bartending at the Geffen Playhouse in Westwood, here in LA. And I just, would keep glancing over and see this very cute redhead giving me, batting her eyes at me and giving me looks. And I just had to say hello, and she seemed interesting. So I just asked her to come over to the side real fast and just said, "I think you're beautiful. I'd love to take you out for a drink."
And the Geffen Playhouse is right next to UCLA, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so I've been working there for maybe, a year or two. And I will say that I noticed him before he noticed me, but so we might contend with that. But yeah, and Skylar always says that one of the first like dates we really got to know each other was when he invited me over to read Sides, and then it was like, oh wait, like this, like there's a artistic connection here as well, and that definitely was part of his wooing me. I was wooed by that, to be able to talk artistically and share in that way, and it's been 6 years in October, so yeah. Oh, thank you for the little clapping.
I did a golf clap for those who.
A little golf clap for those who are listening in. So yeah.
Oh, so 6 years, excellent. And was this and so it was really COVID led to Lonely Night being made? Like, had you talked about collaborating on something and shooting it even before that?
Well, we I can say I feel really lucky about this. Skylar and I would bounce stories off each other all the time. So we would, and it's funny actually, like earlier on in our relationship, we set up kind of a similar construct to what got Lonely Night started, which is we both decided, hey, like we want to be writing more. Let's give ourselves like a setup and then go away and write our own like 5 pages and then come back and see where that led us. And, so we did that exercise and had so much fun doing it. Those films were never made. Maybe they will be made. They were never made.
We tried once.
We tried once. We tried once to make a film while we were visiting some of Skylar's family in Lake Tahoe. We got his mom even involved to help us. It was a similar, actually, like it was kind of more of a silly. There was a dead body involved, but it was like a little more silly. We were kind of like bumbling criminals.
People who aren't supposed to be criminals who now are trying to get rid of a body.
Yeah, and that there were several reasons why it didn't exist past shooting a few scenes and having.
I'm going to call it sound.
Yeah, sound being one of them. But it was that kind of got us started, I would say, and then I mean I'd be curious what you feel, Skylar, but I feel like the impetus for Lonely Night came out of a similar. We were in New Haven, not really leaving my tiny little studio apartment where I was doing grad school on Zoom, and we had like a month and a half off for break. And what started off as us like just kind of rapidly watching all sorts of movies that we'd never seen before kind of turned into, well, like here's the seed of an idea, let's both go away and like write on opposite ends of the room. And then we read our scenes or our like short films to each other, and suddenly we're like, wait, we should make this. Like, why not? We've got the time. Let's do it.
Yeah. It was, what was it, December of 2020, and I came out to spend the holiday with Sarah because it was all lockdown. Nobody was going anywhere. Nobody was doing anything. And we had this idea that, like, I know we talked about that we wanted to make something together sometime. And it seemed like, well, maybe we can do it for this. And I'd flown out with like no return date. I didn't know when I was going to come back, but I knew I was going to be there for a little bit. And, it sort of turned into me staying out there for 2 months, because it like all of a sudden it was like, yeah, let's make a movie. What can we do? I mean, like, we're going to be stuck in here. What can we make in here that would then be a story that just the two of us can tell? And so it was almost like a challenge. And so our prompt that we sort of came up with the idea of a prompt, for each other. And I think the basis was, there's a door, like one person has locked themselves in a room and is refusing to come out, and the other one won't leave them there. And so through that, we're like, okay, we could do like a genre thing, like a zombie movie.
Yeah.
So once we were able to sort of do that, it was like, okay, and it just sort of like refine and figure out where are we going to go with this. And then we decided that okay, so we're gonna, someone's been bitten by a zombie and is stuck behind a door. They've locked themselves and they're not coming out. So we both sort of sat off and, on our own for a day and wrote these, and like sort of spent another day going over it again. But within 2 days, we both had scripts that we had written. And I read mine first, and then I read Sarah's, and I was just sort of like, oh, this is so much better than what I wrote. Oh my God, the writing is incredible. Oh. So it was very much like, oh, we're going to make your movie, Sarah. Yeah. And so, but we only had, we're like, well, we can do this within a month. We give ourselves a month to do this. Mm-hmm. So
which actually I mean, you wrote it to use the space you had.
Mm-hmm.
So a month is actually a fair amount of time, I would think, for a single location idea that you wrote. I imagine this might have been one of the rare ones where the script was actually not as long, because I remember us talking about the film's a little over 20 minutes. And I think Skylar and I talked about, like, I might have said something, you're like, when a short gets that long, it's hard to program, but this one was so fucking good, like we were going to show it in the theater no matter what. So, but I'm picturing a much shorter screenplay than the actual film turned out.
It was. I'm actually trying to remember right now the number of pages, but it was shorter, and I remember Skylar and I at first. Well, I think we were first a little. This is getting into the editing, but we were a little afraid of how long it turned out, and or maybe even like shocked. But what I felt like you were saying just a moment ago about how a month is like kind of a great amount of time to be able to not only prep but then film and get the first edit done within a month, and it became like what we did every day was we really kind of took ourselves step by step, because not only was it an experiment and just a challenge for us, but also I had never really made a film in detail, and Skylar had in film school, but I hadn't, and so I really wanted to I wanted to sit down, I wanted to storyboard everything, and I really wanted to do things that maybe a more experienced filmmaker would know more intuitively. I was like, oh, I want to be watching all these movies and getting our inspiration, and be influenced by Bergman's confessional close-ups and
Cries and Whispers.
Cries and Whispers. We watched that, and that definitely contributed to the way we filmed kind of the confessional, strange, out of time monologue that happens in the 11th hour of the film. And I had Skylar, we watched In the Mood for Love, and kind of the epic intimacy of Wong Kar-wai was something that became really important, and we were greatly influenced by. So the month, like you kind of articulated, was plenty of time for us to really take the time, and even for the more serious content and themes, kind of get silly with it, and have some fun, building some of our set pieces or decoration, and what I will kind of just hop back real quick, Skylar talking about genre, we were like, oh, so many filmmakers begin with genre, and I feel like genre films are such an incredible way to take your problems and make them your answers to the questions that you have, and we filmed our first day trying to do it in color, and then it looked back at what we had, and we were like, well, we're doing a black and white film.
We're going to do that again.
We're just making a black and white film. And we're doing that with great,
So wait, so you didn't just pull out the color in the editing program you used? You actually lit it differently for that purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first day we shot, and the idea was, we can do it, and we're going to do this whole thing in full color and all that. And to me, it felt very soft. Something wasn't working right. And, I know there was going to be like some blood effects and things like that we were doing. And I was just trying to, again, problem solve. And it was like, well, what if we did, what if I just pull the color out, and like, so just playing with that all of a sudden I was like, you know what, this just feels right. And it just felt right for the film. It's about these two people and they're both faced with this choice. And so, of like yes or no. And it's very black and white kind of decisions that these people are trying to make, where he's saying, you need to go. And she's like, I have to stay. And so it felt thematic, and dramatic, and then really let us play with, a lot of the lighting and the feeling, towards the end, especially at the end. And so
color now.
Meaning I think it really works well in black and white. But I know from the very beginning, it was this idea that we're going to shoot it on the iPhone, on a phone, because we're in this little 1-bedroom apartment, and it's just the two of us, something that both of us can learn how to can use and work with well. And we gave ourselves 5 days of prep before we had 5 days of shooting, and then we were going to have a couple weeks to edit. Mm-hmm. And so during the 5 days of prep, I was on Amazon just ordering every little thing I could think of, putting it on my credit card, with the full intention of like, okay, save all the boxes, don't mess anything up, because as soon as we're done, I'm going to send it all back.
We got a fog machine that we never used.
We used it that first day. We're like, oh, it doesn't work. Like it isn't working at all.
It made my entire apartment sticky, and we were like, we can't do this.
Nope.
We ended up with so much leftover blood, but it was. Thank God for Amazon returns.
Oh, I know.
And I was going to add, when I talked about the length, I think one of the reasons why the script might have been short is that you truly did make it so cinematic. Like it is a very, and odds are I'm old enough, whatever, maybe the black and white adds to the feeling of it being cinematic, but also just the shots, the pace of when you move the camera, it just feels so cinematic for a film that could feel claustrophobic. Instead, it feels cinematic to me. So
what I wanted to do was to really build a sense of loneliness and isolation inside this place. So I shot it on an anamorphic lens, the Moment anamorphic lens for the cell phone stuff. They have like a special case for it that I can put on the phone. So I was able to really get this big, wide space and make this little apartment feel much bigger, much emptier, to really add to that feeling. And then that with just trying to move the camera as little as possible. Again, because it's just the two of us, there wasn't really any space for us to move anything unnecessarily.
Yeah.
But within that, I think it really let the two of us explore our own stillness, and just really just trying to be rooted in where we are and what was going on, and really and give ourselves the time to see that this place that we're at has been lived.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing I'll just add to that, Skylar, as well. Like, since we did take such time, even upon my insistence, though Skylar, I think, was also down for the ride, but like so much time in the storyboarding, like that was making the characters feel very alone in each shot was very important to make them feel like these small things in a lot of space, and for that to slowly push in with each scene until they are the main part of the frame was something that was like just an exciting thing to, like Skylar said, explore, like not only as like filmmakers but also actors on camera, and to have to navigate that. And I think that another reason I think the fact that we were doing black and white is then the relationship to when the frame did get more crowded with shape or with shadow, it like added to this narrowing of the world and narrowing of the choice, or even like what the consequence of what was going to happen. And yeah, it was. I'm happy to hear that the space didn't feel cramped, perhaps until it was intentionally so.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's completely engaging. I mean, I assume you got to watch it at a couple of festivals with a live audience, and I recall the audience just really appreciated it as well.
I haven't been able to see it with the live audience yet, but I'm so happy to hear that that I know that Skylar has, and he's been able to report back.
Yeah, it's maybe partly intentional, but like the credits. I mean, it is intentional. The credits, it's written by Sarah Lyddan, directed by Skylar Adams Sarah Lyddan, featuring just the two of us, and then the only other credit I have there is shot on iPhone. And I think when people see it at the end, they go, "What? Really?" And for me, I truly believe that like anybody can make a movie, but it takes craft and planning, but you can make a good movie on your cell phone, and people do. And, it's really putting the power in our hands to make whatever we want. And for me, this was an opportunity to really explore that and see what can we do and push, this type of filmmaking. And I think it worked out pretty good, considering. Like, I think I'd probably do a few things differently, but I don't think I'd want to, because the experience of what we did was so amazing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with your sentiment that anyone can make a film, especially with this available technology. And, every Macintosh comes with iMovie, let alone something else or this or that. But you did go to what I consider a good film program. I think Cal State Northridge actually doesn't get the credit it deserves around LA. I see a lot of good films out of there. So the fact that you, like, not to put down any of the other film schools around LA, but I think a lot of really good work comes out of Northridge, and it's well measured, thoughtful work. So I think you have an advantage over other people because you learned a lot about filmmaking.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the best things I learned in film school was something one of my directing mentors taught me. Because I was shooting my thesis film. It was our first day of shooting, and we're running behind. I have a child actor and things with, like, he's a passenger in a moving car, and you got all these rules and things that go into that. We're like leading up to this part of the day and everything. I just asked him, he's like, "So how am I doing?" And he said, "What's the first thing that a director says after they yell cut?" I didn't really know the answer to that. And he said, "They ask, what's next?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're asking what's next, but you know what's next because you've already discussed what's the next setup, what's the next shot. And you have all these things already planned that you've already talked to with your AD and your cinematographer and everything 2 shots ahead, so that when it comes time for you to say what's next, they already know, they're ready to go, and things just start to move." And once I started thinking about filmmaking in that sense, it was like, oh, wow, you can really this is how you stay on top of time management and make sure you get everything you need. And I'd spent, a month planning, shooting, that film with, storyboards and and knowing exactly what I wanted to see and how to do it and all that. But then when it comes down to the day, it's all of a sudden you're like, oh, this doesn't work. So what do you do? But if you've done that prep work and you've told people what you want to do, and they know and they're on board with you, then, and you're really collaborating together and working that way, all of a sudden things just start clicking and you get everything you need. And so I think within that, I definitely got a really great lesson from film school in that sense.
Excellent. And did it give you the itch to make more?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like we're both often like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do next? Like, what are we going to do next? And I feel like we also, both together or apart, we like run story ideas back and forth all the time. I know we both have our own independent writing projects. Every once in a while, Skylar brings up that first writing prompt, short scripts, and says, "Why don't we make that 5-minute one?"
Sarah wrote it. It's amazing.
Oh, well.
Really good.
Something a little more lighter, more lighter in tone, but very playful.
The hide the body one.
Actually, the
prompt was "I'm pregnant."
Yeah, that was the prompt, and then we wrote it out. But I think more kind of a bumbling Bonnie and Clyde story. Yeah, but we clearly like write for each other and for dynamics that we find funny or fun, and but yeah, it's so surreal and so wonderful to be talking about Lonely Night now, because it feels like that was so long ago. But yeah, I know I'm asking myself that question a lot: is what do I want to either say now, or what am I hungry for? And then I remind myself, Lonely Night, we literally kind of gave each other a challenge, and then out of it, we said everything that we needed to say at that time, or were hungry to say. And I think it's that combination of lack of preciousness and also great intention. So I'm still in the process of asking what's next. But how about you, Skylar? How would you answer that?
I mean, I'm always working on something, trying to write something. I have several shorts. I have a few shorts that I've directed, and one of them I've been in, that are on my website. I have a couple features that, or one of them is in like its third draft, and then another one I'm still working on with with a friend, because I'm into weird, wild, bonkers shit. So
actually, we both are.
Yeah, and so that's sort of where I'm at now, writing and looking for ways to make more movies. I don't necessarily want to keep making films on the phone as much as I think it's great. I do think that it is very limited. That was definitely something I found in making our film, and it took me a long time to sort of realize, very quickly I saw the limitations of the phone, but I didn't want to believe them.
We struggle with depth, right? With creating depth.
It was
a struggle. Texture. We're also working back in black and white, which was its own added element.
That's something for people to understand. When you're shooting on a cell phone, is that yes, they shoot 4K, but the sensor is the size of my thumbnail. So no matter what, you're only getting this much information. So if you blow it up and you put it on a big screen or projector or something like that, that pixelization, that digitalization, things like that, there's nothing you can do about it. That's part of the image. That is the way the image was recorded. It took me about a month to be like, fine, as I'm going through editing and trying to figure out why this won't go away. So it's one of those things that, like, I know as a filmmaker, I'd like to be able to experiment more with different, depths of field and, long lenses and things that you just can't really do on a cell phone. So for my next one, probably won't be on a phone. But I've made like
so many
on cell phones.
Yeah.
And your story makes me think of the fact that if only we could give everyone about 2 months with nothing else to do every year, like we Americans are always jealous of the Australian and European vacation time people get. Like just be able to stop life and have 2 months to just be like, you know what? Maybe you would get more friends involved because there wouldn't be a horrible disease swarming around outside the front door. But and by the way, we didn't even talk too much about COVID, but I think we did talk last year at the Q&A about how the analogy is just, it's so nice. obviously I might have said something to Skylar along the lines of, I was so fucking sick of the COVID movies, like the bad, not bad, but poorly used analogies. Whereas your film, it's just a very subtle thing that there's something really dangerous in the world.
Yeah.
We really wanted it to be, we were very intent on it not being too on the nose, but being something that could be specific enough that it could be accessible in in an intimate way. And I know that was something we really wanted to toe the line on because, we had seen a lot of, by December of 2020, we'd seen a lot of bad COVID or lockdown films. And we just wanted to tell our story that felt so adjacent without being too on the nose.
Yeah, absolutely. Bravo! Another golf clap for that. and I wish, if only I'm sure you two would do something wonderful if you had another 2 months where you couldn't think about doing other things. If you just are like, well, we have 2 months, we could read a bunch of books, watch a bunch of films, or make something. Like, you'd probably make another great thing.
I bet we could. I mean, it's kind of making me think maybe we should.
I know. I'm like, well, we have 2 weeks. We have 2 weeks off for
the holiday. We could do it
for December. I do think a lot about as I'm out of school now and back in the world and doing my day jobs and doing the auditions and all that. I know Skylar's doing that as well. The finding that time to create, whether that's like alone time or time with someone else, is it's something to really you have to really commit to, but also it's hard to find time. So you have to invent time or elongate time in order to do it.
It is. It's the greatest challenge, right? Because there's other realities in life, like having somewhere to live and food to eat. So you can't. And time relates to that as well, and that's a toughie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the other things that maybe we didn't say, but like that 2 months that we had to really do this in the month we had to make this movie. Also, they were like paying us to stay home.
Yeah, there were stimulus checks.
Yeah. And so, thank you for the stimulus to help fund this film.
I was gonna say we're a funded film, given
that and Dogecoin, but
I mean
that's a whole other thing because that happens.
You mean you had a good timing on that?
I had just perfect timing on Dogecoin.
Oh, that is nice to hear.
Yeah. So I got a tip from a friend who said, "Hey, you should buy some of this." And I did, and then like 2 days later, it just it took off. I was like, so that was a good experience. But it all fell into this thing of us just being able to be together and have the time to really just focus on this movie and making a great film. It was a real gift to be able to have that opportunity, and also to be able to share it with someone that I love and care so much about.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like something to add that I think a lot about now that we don't have perhaps it feels like we don't have all that time to create something, is I feel like when I think about that period, it was also just such a period of allowing ourselves to be influenced and moved by so much. I mean, we were filming during the day or like in our prep time before we began filming, we were like watching a movie a day. We were just taking so much in and doing all this research and, as like we move out of having that kind of time we did to actually make the movie, I'm like, oh, well, there's still ways to find time to be watching new films and researching like stories or ideas that are close to us, or hearing like communal stories that our communities are telling or wanting to say. And sometimes it feels like there can be more time for that than the making, but that time is just as valuable, like taking in stories and letting them percolate as you get ready to get more into the doing.
Yeah, that's well, I shouldn't say this, but you're bringing up the other side of the cell phone that gives us all the ability to, we all have a 4K camera in our pockets,
Yeah.
But that little device also sucks up so much free time that we could spend thinking or
Sure.
Daydreaming, looking out a window.
daydreaming. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's one has to be very vigilant with one's time and thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully articulated. The cell phone like can tell you how much of a percentage of like whether your percentages are up or down about how much time you've spent on the phone, and that is always. Skylar was visiting the other a couple weeks ago, and my percentages were so far down, and I was like, oh, they're just so. Just amazing how addictive the phone is, but when you're actually with people and engaging in the world, they're so unnecessary. And I don't know, there's plenty of films that are walking on my street right now, like there's just so much to witness and bear witness to. Um, yeah.
Excellent. Well, the cool thing is I don't even have to ask you if there's people who contributed to Lonely Night who need to be mentioned because no, you two made this film. So I love the credits and everything. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
You talked about sort of the length of the movie, and I know we discussed it a little bit, of it being 21 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And our first cut of the film was 20 minutes long, or like just over 20 minutes long. And we tried, and like, I remember, I'd spent, with Sarah and us going back and forth cutting this movie together. And, really struggling to try and keep the time down because it just didn't work otherwise. And I remember like, okay, I think this is it. And we both sat down and watched it together. And at the end, after we screened it for ourselves the first time, both of us just jumping up and just, oh my God, it works! It works!
We were
and
jumping up and down in my
around
apartment.
the room. Yeah. But I tried to cut it to like 15 minutes, 16, 17, 18 minutes. It doesn't work. The film just never worked. The pace, I felt like this is how it has to run. This is how it goes. And so, the movie is as long as it has to be. And I think that's something that is important to remember sometimes, that, you can try and fit something into a little box or something, but like if it's going to be to the detriment of what it is, then don't. Sometimes things can take their time and it's all right.
As the programmer of two film festivals, I can say, I don't want to say it out loud for the world, but it almost feels like 20 is the new 15 because watching all these films that get submitted, honestly, once you start getting over 15 minutes and you creep up into 20, there's like a quality bump. I mean, I'm not saying we don't have great films under 10 this year, and we have a couple, real quickies that are wonderful, but I don't know if it was lockdown and people having more time to do thoughtful edits or just, I can't even put my finger on it, but we actually get so many long shorts now that we had to create a new category. We actually, when you submitted your film, I believe we've had, I bet shorts were 40 minutes or less and features were 40 minutes or more. And now the way the two film festivals work is under 20 minutes is called a short, 20 to 60 is called a featurette, and 60 plus is called a feature. And we hit so many good goddamn featurettes. And I'm like, wow. It's just funny because programming, obviously, I think Lonely Night was probably in a block of 3 or 4 films and a nice quality block of high quality films. But, boy, you can't go more than like, it's weird. It's weird to have a couple films like over 20 minutes. Like it makes my job tougher to program it. That's
I've always felt, at least with Lonely Night, it doesn't feel like 20 minutes.
That was the thing that was so shocking is when we did that first cut, which honestly, I don't think it really changed a ton after the first cut because like Skylar said, it was coming in around 20 minutes. It just felt like we needed to kept its own pace. Like that somehow the film had the ride. It had the ride, and by the time it was over, we were like, wow. Like, we had moments when we were editing, like, oh, this scene is running too long, or are we lingering, or is this happening? But somehow the its own mechanism existed, and like Skylar articulated, I'm grateful that people have been willing to sit down and watch it, even seeing the 20-minute mark. And I'm happy to hear about featurettes. That makes me really glad.
I was trying to share that Lonely Night was a harbinger of the films that we're going to follow the following year, because over 20 is now, it's become a thing. I can notice it. I notice it. So pretty soon you won't even have to pretend to excuse it for its length, because it's like, hey, it's an average. It's a short film. It's a normal short film, I'll say. Yeah. Although I guess technically it's 21, so it'll be a featurette now.
Oh, hey, featurette.
Cool. Yeah.
And if you look up featurette on Wikipedia, it like goes back to early days of cinema in like the early 1900s, when there were featurettes or called a two-reeler, right?
You'd like sit down and watch a couple things.
Yeah, well, you'd go to the movies and you'd see some newsreels, and then some 20-minute two-reelers or three-reelers, and then it's a Three Stooges thing, and then it was, so featurette has returned to us.
Cool. Glad to be at the forefront of a new category.
You are. And a category that has a lot of goddamn quality to it. All right, well. And, I didn't warn you before we started recording, but right before I go into my closing spiel with all of the websites and social media handles for the film festival and stuff, do you two want to share yours?
Oh, sure. You can show mine. Yeah. Mine is going to be, I'm Sarah Lyddan, and I don't have a Twitter. I am off Twitter. But my Instagram is Sarah, and then the last name is spelled actually Lyddammn. So it's Sarah Lyddan, is my Instagram handle. And I'll make sure to email that to you as well, in case you want to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, always in the show notes.
Yeah.
I'm on Insta is at Skylar Adams. That's Skylar Skylar with an A. And my website, where you can find Lonely Night and my other films, is SkylarAdamsFilm.com.
SkylarAdamsFilm.com. Excellent. All right. Those will be in the show notes.
Awesome.
Because it's easy to do as I type them too. All right. And Adams has one D. I think that's the normal way to spell it.
Yeah.
But
that's the normal way to spell it. Yeah.
I think it's only the Adams family has two Ds, huh? Yeah. I'm sure you were a guy. I was not implying anything. All right.
No.
I will try to do this quickly. All right, so we talked about how Lonely Night was in the Sherman Oaks Film Festival and will someday be in the Discover Indie Film TV series. So if you go to discoverindiefilm.com or at DIF Wins on social media, you can learn more about this podcast or the TV series it gave birth to. Sherman Oaks Film Festival is very easy. It's ShermanOaksFF.com and Sherman Oaks FF on social media. And there's a sister festival in June. I think that's the one that Skylar was on the filmmakers board for and helped give out some awards to some really good films back in June. So if you want to learn more about that festival, it's at Film Invasion LA on social media, and it's filminvasionla.com on what you say, the internets. And just to be silly, you guys seem cool, so I'll just add that I got silly and started a third thing because I hate myself and I don't feel I have the right to personal time. So on April 20th, we're going to have our third THC Cinema movie night at the theater. Well, and people might understand what THC Cinema stands for, but needless to say, it's legal where Skylar and I live. So it was perfectly responsible to tell people to come watch about 15 shorts that are fantastic to watch while you're high, in a responsible way. So anyway, you can go to thccinema.com or at THC Cinema if you want to learn about that fun evening. I lose money on that one, man, but what can I say? I spent a couple $100 out of my own pocket I lost, and I got to sit in a theater with 60 other people and watch a series of insanely cool movies that were custom made for the THC-addled mind.
Very cool.
And now I'm sure everyone's going to think this guy's. I swear to God, I don't get high all the time, but I do watch hundreds of films. So you can imagine how often I'm watching these submissions to Sherman Oaks Film Festival, and I go, that'd probably be a pretty good high.
Cool.
All right. Well, Sarah Lyddan, Skylar Adams, thank you both for taking the time to do this. Anyone who wants to know, you should know, like we always do on this podcast, we're going to stop recording and then we're going to start recording again. And these two are going to share their 3 favorite films and an underrated film, an overrated film, lesser known that people stick out based upon all your cinematic references during this interview. I'm looking forward to this list. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to wish that I have time to watch movies for myself instead of for this stuff. But actually, Sherman Oaks Film Festival starts tonight, and next week I might actually be able to watch a film of my choosing. So we'll see.
Ooh.
But thank you
This
both
has been
so
a
much.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. This has
so
been
much
great.
for having us.
All right, and thank you everyone for listening.